Years I spent in vanity and pride, caring not my ways crucified, knowing not it was for me he died on Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burden soul found liberty at Calvary. By God's word at last my sin I learned, then I trembled at the law I'd spurned, till my guilty soul imploring turned to Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burden soul found liberty at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burden soul found liberty at Calvary,
Donna and I live in West Tennessee, but before that we lived outside of a little town called Fair Grove, and Fair Grove is about 15 miles north of Springfield, Missouri. And at that time, the Lord had blessed us with about 6 acres of land, and I would say probably 90% of the land was trees. So we had a lot of wildlife there. We had the turkey and the deer, the rabbits, the squirrels, and we had a lot of birds. When we moved there, Donna said, I'd like to have a bird feeder right outside of our living room window. So we went out shopping for a bird feeder. Now we got one of those squirrel-proof bird feeders. Don't you believe it? Those squirrels can get in just about anything they want to. But that's not the story. We got one of those feeders. We hung it outside. We filled it up full of bird seed. And sure enough, the birds started coming in. We had the cardinals, the finches, the red-headed woodpeckers that come in. The little chickadees will fly in there. Then the doves will come in and pick up the seeds that fall on the ground. So we had a good variety of birds that would come in. And they come flying in about 7:30 in the morning to get their breakfast. They'd fly in there, grab their food, and fly off. And one morning I was sitting there watching them, and they were flying in and flying out, and this little chickadee flew in there, landed, but it didn't fly away. And I would watch it, and every once in a while it'd flap its wings, but it still wouldn't fly. So I went right up to the window. Now the bird feeder's about 4 feet from the window. I went up to the window, I watched that bird for a while. He'd flap its wings, he'd jump a little bit, but he still wouldn't fly away. So I got my shoes on, and I went out on the deck, went right up to that bird feeder, and here that little chickadee had got its head stuck right between the 2 bars where the seeds come out. Folks, he could have flapped his wings all day. He wasn't going anywhere. So I grabbed a hold of him with my right hand, and with my left hand, I opened up the back of that bird feeder, and I wiggled his little head out between those 2 bars, made sure he was okay, and when I opened up my hand, he flew and landed about 3 feet from me on our railing, and he turned around and looked at me.
Thank you.
No, he didn't talk to me. But if he could have, he probably would have said thank you. Thank you for getting me out of the situation I got myself into. You know, kindness works on everything. Everybody needs to try a little kindness.
You can see your brother standing by the road with a heavy load from the seeds he sowed. If you see your sister falling by the way, just stop and say, you're going the wrong way. You got to try a little kindness, show a little kindness, shine your light for anyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you overlook the blindness a narrow-minded people, a narrow-minded people. Show kindness, shine your light for everyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you overlook the blindness of the narrow-minded people, of the narrow-minded people. Don't walk around with down and out, lend a helping hand. And the kindness that you show every day will help someone along life's way. You've got to try a little kindness, show a little kindness, shine your light for everyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you overlook the blind of the narrow-minded people, of the narrow-minded people.
Amen. One of the things that's really hard to find in our world today, and that's peace. Do any of you know anybody that lives in Ukraine? We don't either, but our son Daniel does. His company that he works for has sent him over there many times, and he's got a lot of close friends over there. So I talked to him recently and said, have you heard from your friends? And he said, we can't hear directly from them, but people that know them, that live outside of the country, or people that are here in the United States that know them, have kind of kept track of them. And the last that he heard, at least their families had gotten out safely. But you know, they blocked the borders from the men leaving because they needed them to be fighting. It's a horrible thing, isn't it? It's unimaginable. And Jesus said, my peace I give to you, not like the world gives. Let not your heart be troubled. We've been listening to some of the updates from OCI. Outpost Centers International. Have you been hearing some of that? And the Lord is using this horrible situation to really touch hearts. There are people, one of the stories that I just recently heard, there was, right in Kiev, there is a group of Adventists that have a lifestyle center, and so they're receiving people and trying to help them. And this young woman came. Somehow she got the actual cell phone number of the man that's the doctor in charge of that. And she got a hold of him and called him and said, can you help arrange for me to get out of Kiev? And so they met, and he was able to get that arranged. And he said, I'm an Adventist. I want to give you something that will encourage you. And she burst into tears. And she said, I used to be an Adventist too. The Lord is taking something horrible and turning it around so that people can find their way to Jesus. Time is short everywhere. We get so complacent here where things seem to be peaceful, don't we? But those folks are coming face to face with the issues of eternity. And if the Lord can take something like that and use it, He can surely take us here in this country. It sounds like you folks have spent the afternoon out in the cold, sharing the light of Jesus with your neighbors, and He will definitely bless them.
Amen.
We can trust the peace that Jesus gives us. Calls me
will be peace in the
valley
for
me.
Dear Lord, I
pray.
there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the
Valley for me. The wolf will be gentle, and the bear will be tame, and the lion shall lay down with the lamb. Oh yes, and the beast from the wild will be led by a child, and I'll be changed from this creature that I am.
There will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me, dear Lord.
I pray.
There'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me.
Sing along if you'd like to.
There will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me, dear Lord.
I pray.
There'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me.
There will be peace in the valley for me.
Amen.
How many of you heard the style of music called bluegrass? Very good. How many of you like bluegrass? Well, don't get excited because we don't know how to play it. I wish that we did, but we don't know how to play it at all. But we were in a little church here not long ago in Missouri, and we were just got started playing, and a mother and a daughter come in the door, and they sat about halfway in between the pews there. And I would say the mother was probably about 95 years old. And when she leaned over and talked, she thought she was whispering, but everybody could hear her. And she leaned over to her daughter and she said, "That sounds like green grass." So that's what we play. We're going to go ahead and give it a try. If you like it, that's good. If you don't like it, well, we can try something else. This is called Little Mountain Church House. There's a little mountain church in my thoughts yesterday, where friends and family gathered for the Lord. There an old-fashioned preacher taught a straight and narrow way for what few call his congregation good. Dressed in all our very best, sat on pews solid oak. I remember how our voices filled the air, while we sounded like an angel on those high soprano notes.
All right. Yes.
When the roll is called yonder on the way, looking back on that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard the word I based my life on. Looking back on that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. was heard where I based my life. At the office and the singing and dinner on the rise, many were the souls that were revived, while my brothers and my sisters who have gone on before slept in peace in that maple grove nearby. Looking back on that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard where I based my life. I first heard where I based my life.
Now you know what green grass sounds like.
Well, I grew up on a farm over in Iowa, and farming back then was a lot like it is now. It was pretty hard to make a living as a farmer. And so my dad had another job about 35 miles away, and he'd get up every morning about 4:30 whistling and head off to work and make cement blocks in a block factory all day long. And then when he got done with that job and came home, farm chores still had to be done. And I can remember lots of nights I'd look out of the bedroom window of our big farmhouse there, and there'd be the headlights of that old Oliver 1850 tractor out planting and cultivating and harvesting. But even though Dad was so busy, he always took time for us kids. He took us out in the woods and showed us the beauties of nature. The woods in Iowa are a lot like they are in Indiana, and I think if you went for a walk in the woods when it finally warms up a little bit, you'd see some of those beautiful wildflowers just starting to come up. My dad's hands were never clean and smooth. They were always cut and scarred with grounded grease. But when I put my little hand in that big, strong hand, I felt really safe. And I remember thinking, if God is like my dad, then I know he's someone I can trust. That's the way the Lord designed it, isn't it? That he would give us an earthly father to show us the love of our heavenly Father, that we would come to trust him. I know not every child has that blessing, but even in cases of abuse and neglect, there's a special Bible promise. In the Psalms it says, when my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. He's our perfect Father, isn't he? The perfect example of absolute unselfish love. Well, someone wrote a song for her dad, and when I heard it, I thought, she must have known my dad. I'm sure some of you have heard this song. If you'd like to sing along, please feel free to do that. And think about the love in our Heavenly Father's hands. I remember Daddy's hands holding silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare. You could read quite a story in the calluses of lives, years of crying and worry, and left their mark behind. I remember Daddy's hands, how they held my mama tight and patted my back for something done right. There are things that I've forgotten that I love about the man, but I'll always remember the love in Daddy's hands.
Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I done wrong.
Daddy's hands were always gentle, but I've come to understand.
There was always love in Daddy's hands.
I remember Daddy's hands working till it bled, sacrificing
soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I done wrong.
Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand.
There was always love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I done wrong.
Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand.
There was always love in Daddy's hands.
There was always love in Daddy's hands.
Amen.
Well, do you remember some of the advice that your dads and moms gave you through the years? I mostly remember things that Mom would say because she spent more time with us kids. She'd say things like this: if you don't have anything nice to say,
Don't say it.
don't say anything at all. You had moms like me. I do remember one thing Dad would say. If we'd be out in the yard playing, we'd fall and skin our knee, he would say, well, just be glad it's not your pants. Your skin will heal. Well, this young man wrote a song about the advice that his dad gave him through the years. It's very practical advice. Some of it comes directly from the Bible. Some of it is a little comical, but it's definitely good advice. And you may have heard your parents tell you these things. It's called Don't Ever Sell Your Saddle. Daddy should have been a preacher man, 'cause everybody loved to hear him speak. He didn't always follow his own advice, but we got a sermon every week. He'd say trouble always starts as fun, broken hearts will always mend. Tough times don't last, tough people do. Nothing breaks if it can't mend. Don't ever sell your saddle. Never owe another man. Watch where you spit on a windy day. Don't use words you don't understand. Find the Lord before you need Him. And never lose your stride. Don't ever sell your saddle, 'cause life's a long, long ride. Daddy never ran from anything, always took his share of the blame. Had a heart big enough to fill a valley up, but hard enough to stop a train. He'd say only fight when you have to, 'cause there's always a faster gun. You'll know a hero from a coward when you see which way they run. Don't ever sell your saddle. Never owe another man. Watch where you spit on a windy day. Don't use words you don't understand. Find the Lord before you need Him. And never lose your stride. Don't ever sell your saddle, 'cause life's a long, long ride. Don't ever sell your saddle, 'cause life's a long, long ride.
Hey, before we go on to the next song, how many of you folks would like to know what the instruments are? Thank you, because I wouldn't know what to say if you said no. So I'm glad you do. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to raise up the ones we can, because we know that you know what some of these are. And if you know it, you holler it out for us, okay? If you don't know it, she's going to tell you. Veronica's going to tell us what they are, okay? All right, how about this one right here?
Mandolin.
No, this one. Dulcimer. What type of dulcimer?
Mountain dulcimer.
Very good, Veronica. It's a mountain dulcimer. It's also called the lap dulcimer. And the difference between the mountain dulcimer and the lap dulcimer is when you're in the mountains, it's a mountain dulcimer. Very good, yes. And when you're on the flatlands, it's a lap dulcimer. That's the only difference. How about this one? A mandolin. That is a custom-made mandolin. Donna's brother is building mandolins, and he built that for us. We're glad he did because we really enjoy playing it. How about this one?
Sultry.
Psaltery. That is a bowed psaltery, just like they talk about it in the book of Psalms. They talk about a psaltery and a harp and some of the other instruments that King David played. That is a psaltery. Everywhere we go, we always tell everybody that's the psaltery that David played. We're talking about our son David, is who we're talking about. How about this one right here? Excuse me? A zither, very good. That is called a zither. They started making the zithers back in the late 1800s. And all you do in the zither is you pluck the notes. Early 1900s, they came out with an auto harp, and some of you may know what an auto harp looks like.
Yes.
And actually, the zither, the auto harp took the place of the zither because they made it easier for folks to play. On the auto harp, you push the notes down, then you strum them. On the zither, you have to pluck each note out. How about the one right up here in front?
Dulcimer.
What type of dulcimer, Veronica?
Hammer dulcimer.
Hammer dulcimer, very good. She's a quick learner, you know. That's a hammer dulcimer. We're going to go ahead and do a song called Lily of the Valley. And Donna's going to start up with the zither, go to the psaltery, and then into the hammer dulcimer. Now, folks, if she gets a little excited, one comes flying your way, you catch it, all right? Because we don't want it to fall and break on the floor. We was out in Arizona here a while back, and it was a long church, and there was a gentleman sitting way in the back. And he hollered out, "If we catch it, can we keep it?" No. You have to give it back so we can finish the program. Donna's been pretty good, though. There's nothing been flying. This is Lily of the Valley. Another one for you, and if you know the words to this, or you can look it up there and hear a hymnal, because we know you've heard it before. "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." It's one of our favorite songs to do, and Donna will start this with the are there also. One of the things Donna and I really enjoy doing, and that is going to the Christian schools and showing the children the instruments and playing a little bit for them, and then also telling them about them. And then when we get through, we let them come up and play them, and they just really love that part. Excuse me. We were over in California here about 5 years ago. We had about 15 or 16 concerts in the area, and the Christian, one of the music teachers in the Christian schools found out that we were there and wanted to know if we'd come over and play the instruments for the children. We said we'd love to do that. And he had grades 1 through 8, and every hour he had a different class. And he'd stand them outside the door and he'd say, I have a special treat for you today. And then he'd let them come in and we'd be playing the instruments. They'd come in really quiet and they'd be listening to the music. We'd stop, we'd tell them a little bit about the instruments, play a little more, and then we'd let them come up and play them, and they just really enjoyed that part. And it was the 4th graders' turn. And he stood them outside the door and he said, I have a special treat for you today. And one of the little 4th grader boys raised his hand and said, is it muffins? And he says, well, you'll find out when you get in there. And so he let them come in, and they were really quiet. They sat down. We played the instruments, told them about them, played a little more, and then we let them play them. And it was their turn to leave, and the next class come in. And as they were leaving, the little guy went up to his teacher and he said, this was better than muffins. So that was the day we found out that we were better than muffins. But we did a song for them where Donna played all 4 of the instruments, Shall We Gather at the River. Well, we want you to sing with us. You're going to have to look more excited than that. Okay? All right, Donna's going to tell you what we're going to do.
Before they had songbooks and words on the wall and things like that, when folks got together to sing, often the song leader would sing the line and everyone would repeat that back. So we'll try a song like that. This is kind of an old song. When I first heard it, it was sung by somebody kind of famous. And he talked about growing up in the cotton fields out around Dias, Arkansas. And the whole family had to work in the fields, and it was hard work. And he said many times in the evening as they'd head home for supper, he would hear his sister Louise singing this song across the fields, and the whole family would echo it back. That was Johnny Cash. And this song is called A Beautiful Life, but a lot of us know it by a different name, Life's Evening Sun. So if I can remember all the words, if you'll sing along and echo the words back with Don, let's sing this together.
I need a lot of help, so sing it loud.
Life's evening sun
Life's evening sun
is sinking low.
is sinking low.
A few more days,
And I must go
to meet the
to meet the deed
that
that I have done. Where there will be no setting sun.
Each day I'll do
Each day I'll do
a golden deed
a golden deed
by helping those
by helping those
who are in need.
who are in need.
My life on earth
My life on earth
is but a span.
is but a span,
So I'll
so I'll do the best I can.
life's evening sun
Life's evening sun
is sinking low.
is sinking low.
A few more days,
And I must go
to meet the deed
to meet the deed
that I have
that
done.
I have done. Where there will be no setting sun.
While traveling down
While traveling down
life's weary road,
life's weary road,
helps some to bear
helps up to bear
their heavy load.
their heavy load.
I'll try to turn
I'll try to
the night today.
the night today.
Flowers bloom
Flowers bloom along the way. Okay, let's sing aloud.
life's evening sun
Life's evening sun
is sinking low.
is sinking low.
A few more days,
And I must go
to meet the deed
to meet the deed
that I have done.
that I have done.
Where
Where there will be no setting sun.
Where there will be
Where there will be no setting sun.
Well, that wasn't too bad. You're a little soft. Charles, you're going to have to get after him. Folks, we got 2 more songs to do for you. Thank you so much for letting us come and worship with you this evening. We do hope at least one of the songs so far has touched and blessed you in some way.
Amen.
Amen.
A few years ago, our older son Daniel was going through a time of recommitting his heart to the Lord. He had walked away from the Lord in high school, and he was coming back. And he was reading Fox's Book of Martyrs. Not such an easy thing to read. And the great controversy. And as he was reading about these great men and women of God who stood up and gave testimony to their faith, even at the risk of their own lives, he was puzzled about something. How did they know the words to say that would ring through the centuries? How did Martin Luther know to say as he stood before the Diet, "It is unsafe for a man to speak against his conscience. Here I stand. I can do no other." Well, Daniel pondered that for a while, and then he found that verse in the book of Matthew that says, don't plan ahead of time what you're going to say when you're called to give testimony to your faith. The Holy Spirit will give you the words at that time. And he wrote this song, and when he sang it for us, it touched our hearts. Sisters and brothers, we know, as we look around the world that we're living in today, that the things that Jesus said would happen just before he comes back are happening all around us.
Yes.
Amen.
And not just in the financial world or the physical world, but even in our own church. And Jesus said, when you begin to see these things come to pass, look up and lift up your heads. Your redemption draweth nigh.
Amen.
But between now and the time when Jesus comes back, it will not be easy for those who love him. And the time will come, maybe even has come, when each one of us will be called to give testimony to our faith. Maybe not in the words that we say, but in the lives that we live. And the only way that we're going to be able to stand up and be counted for Jesus is if we surrender our hearts to him every moment. And spend time studying his word and sharing his love with others and praying. And if he brings something to our attention that we're holding on to that's separating between us and him, we're saying, Father, please take that too. I don't want there to be anything between me and you,
Amen.
so that we may stand, come what may.
Amen.
Teach me, Lord, today. Tell me what to say when I'm in front of kings and queens. Guide me, Lord, I pray. I will be a
I
light
will be a light.
shining in the night. Though the world takes me to flames, I will keep the light.
I have heard the stories told about the faithful men of old.
They were faithful to the fire.
To be like them is my desire. Help me stand for you, I pray.
Help me witness
Come what may.
there will come a time when our light must shine. Men will hate us for our ways. That is why we must today learn to keep the faith.
Learn to keep the faith.
All the things we say, all the things we do and think, that way we can stand the way.
I have heard the stories told about the faithful men of old.
They were faithful to the fire.
To be like them is my desire. Help me stand for you, I pray.
Help me witness
Come what may.
though they take me to the stake. Peace is mine for Jesus' sake. It's all worth it just to call him friend over again.
I have heard the stories told about the faithful men of old.
They were faithful
be like them is my desire. Help me stand for you, I pray.
Be witness.
Come what may. Come what may.
Help me stand.
Come what may.
Stand. Well, I mentioned to you that I'm a nurse. I guess once you're a nurse, you're always a nurse even though you retire. And when we first moved to Tennessee, it was about 5 years ago now, I knew that I only had about 4 years left to finish up working there in Springfield, Missouri, and we have a granddaughter in Nashville. So we wanted to get closer over that way. So we looked for some land and we found some over in West Tennessee. It's a little less expensive over there and we could get out in the country. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll just keep working over at Cox Hospital and finish my 4 years and then I can just retire. But that was a 6.5-hour commute. And it got old fast. So after a few months, I thought, you know, I got 4 more years of this. I probably should look for a job a little closer to home. So our little county, Decatur County, had a little hospital. It had 5 beds, 5 or 6 beds, and an emergency department, and it had a clinic associated with the hospital. Since then, the hospital has closed, and now there's not a hospital for several counties around there. But it was poor management, and they just had to close their doors in the last 6 months or year or so. Anyway, the clinic wasn't always very busy, and so sometimes they needed help in the emergency department. And I need to back up a little bit and tell you some of my background. I've been a nurse for over 30 years, and I worked in the hospital intensive care units and pediatrics, and I used to take students. I taught for about 20 years, and I took students to labor and delivery. And I also took them to the neonatal intensive care unit. Well, one day when it wasn't so busy at the clinic, the ER called and asked if I could come over. And we got a call from the ambulance, and they said, we're on our way in, and we've got this young girl. She's probably 15 or 16 years old, and she just delivered her baby in the bathtub. She was the only one home way out in the backwoods somewhere, and this baby is way too early, and he is really struggling to breathe. Well, we didn't have a lot of equipment in that little rural hospital, so we got together what we had, and when the ambulance arrived, the baby came to me. And I did what you do. I warmed him up, and I gave him oxygen and tried to stimulate him, and I was praying, Lord, save this little boy. He must have been maybe 27, 28 weeks gestation, very early. And all of a sudden, he turned pink from head to toe, and he let out this big cry, and I knew he was going to be okay. And things calmed down, and I had a chance to look across the room at his mama. And she was so young, and she looked so scared. And the nurse practitioner that was taking care of her was being just as rude as she could be, screaming into the face of this young girl, "You selfish thing, how could you do this? It's all about the baby. What drugs are you on?" And my heart went out to her. And I thought, there, but for the grace of God, go I. How do I know that if my life had been just like her life, that could be me laying in that emergency department, wondering if my new little baby was going to even survive? And she was being treated like a criminal. How much is one soul worth? The only way to estimate the worth of one's soul is to look at the price that Jesus was willing to pay for one. He would have left heaven and gone to that cross if only one of us would have needed his saving grace. He loves us that much. And when Jesus looks at us, he doesn't primarily see our sin. He sees what we can become by his grace if we'll just surrender our hearts to him. And just hear his heart of love. My son, give me thine heart. How much is one soul worth? Well, someone wrote a poem about the worth of the soul, and this anonymous author compared it to an old violin that came up for auction. And to the people at the auction, it looked worthless, until the master violinist came forward and tuned up the strings and played a beautiful melody with the old instrument. And it made all the difference because of the touch of the Master's hand. But we are from West Tennessee, and we don't have very many violins where we come from. But we do have a lot of fiddles. The problem is the word fiddle doesn't fit, so we thought about it. And the word mandolin fits perfectly. So we're going to sing about the worth of the soul in the old mandolin. Well, it was battered and scarred, and the auctioneer felt it was hardly worth its while to waste much time on the old mandolin. They held it up with a smile. It sure ain't much, but it's all we got left. Guess we ought to sell it too. Now who's got a bid on this old mandolin? Just one more will be through. And he cried, "One, give me $1. Who make it two? Only $2. Who make it three? $3 twice, that's a good price. And who's got a bid for me? Raise up your hand and don't wait any longer. The auction's about to end. Who's got more? Just $1 more to bid on this old mandolin." Well, the air was hot and the people stood around. The sun was setting. From the back of the crowd, a gray-haired man came forward, pulled up a chair. He wiped the dust from the old mandolin and tightened up the strings. And he played out a melody pure and sweet as the angels sing. And the music stopped, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and deep, he said, "What am I bid for this old mandolin?" He held it up for all to see. And he cried out, "One, give me 1,000, who'll make it two? Only 2,000, who'll make it three? 3,000 twice, that's a good price. And who's got a bid for me?" The people cried out, "What made the change? You don't understand." And the auctioneer stopped and said with a smile, "It was a touch of the Master's hand." Now you know many a man with a life out of tune is battered and scarred with sin, and he's auctioned cheap to a thankless world, much like the old mandolin. And the master comes and the foolish crowd, they never understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the Master's hand. And he cried out, "One, give me 1,000, who'll make it two? Only 2,000, who'll make it three? 3,000 twice, that's a good price. And who's got a bid for me?" The people cried out, "What made the change? We don't understand." And the auctioneer stopped and he said with a smile, "It was a touch of the Master's hand." It was a touch of the Master's hand.
Amen.
We want to thank you again. Want to thank Charles and Gerald. Thank you both for corresponding with us, and thank you so much for letting us worship with you.
Amen.
I'm gonna have you all back for this. I'm gonna have you all back for this. Thank you. Well, you blessed this evening by the variety of music, the instruments that you've seen that you've read about in the Bible.